Let's begin by defining the deaf. You may already be aware of the fact that 25 million people in the United States alone are deaf or who have some degree of hearing loss. However, not all of these people are members of the deaf community. Indeed, only about 10% of those 25 million people use sign language as their means of communication. These are the primary members of the deaf community. The deaf community also includes hearing people who respect and support the community. What makes the deaf community unique is its language, sign language, and the culture that it has evolved. However, as you will see, even within the population of culturally deaf people who use ASL, there is enormous diversity. Most people have grown up what is known as a medical view of the deaf community. This view says that deaf people are just hearing people whose ears don't work. However, such a view fails to understand the fundamental nature of the deaf community. The focus of this medical perspective is on inability, the inability to hear, and often the inability to speak locally. Often this medical view is held by pathologists, audiologists, speech pathologists, and special educators. Unfortunately, people often assume that these so-called experts know what is best for deaf people and seek their advice for people themselves. Consider for a moment labels that hearing people have used when talking about members of the deaf community. Hearing impaired, profoundly deaf, deaf mute, deaf dumb. Notice how the focus adopted by these labels reflect a medical perspective on deaf people. With this medical perspective comes certain preconceived negative notions and ways of thinking about deaf people. Generally, the preconceived notions are about deaf people's inability to do something. For example, when the focus is on inability, members of the deaf community are often classed with people who are blind, wheelchair bound, mentally retarded. Even the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, signed by President George Bush, views the deaf community as disabled. The medical view says that something is wrong with deaf people, something that must be fixed. That is why people who have a medical perspective feel that they have to make deaf people. However, the deaf community's view of itself is quite different. The vast majority of deaf people do not see themselves as handicapped or disabled. Rather, they view themselves as a linguistic authority whose only power is communicating with people who do not use their language themselves. Members of the deaf community share a cultural, this cultural perspective is determined by one's attitude towards deaf people and towards the deaf community. Members of the deaf community identify themselves as members of the community and value their relationship with the community. Like many linguistic minorities, there are numerous facets to the community. Linguistic, religious, social, and artistic. Let's examine some of these facets. The linguistic facet of the deaf community is the most linguistic. Members of the deaf community use American Sign Language. They are not just using meaningless gestures or pantomime. Indeed, linguistic research done in the early 70s shown that American Sign Language has a very sophisticated syntax. It's different from the grammar and syntax of English. After 20 years of research, there's an impressive body of evidence that documents the fact that ASL possesses all the essential requirements for human languages. Even more intriguing for those who do not know ASL is the fact that ASL is not universal. That is, just like hearing people, deaf people in different countries have evolved their own sign languages. Consider these examples. the United States, deaf children who have deaf parents and who have older deaf siblings generally learn ASL as their first language. Historically, deaf children who have hearing parents have generally learned ASL and been exposed to deaf culture in special schools for deaf children. Virtually every state has such a special school for deaf children. Although there are now other educational alternatives for deaf children, in the eyes of the deaf community, these state-supported schools are extremely important. That is why the deaf community has become politically active in protesting attempts to close these schools or reduce funding. Perhaps the most publicized example of the political side of the deaf community was the Deaf President Now, held at Gallaudet University in March of 1988. This protest, led by students at Gallaudet, dramatically illustrated the deaf community's desire for self-determination. This protest can better be understood by considering two facts. In the 124-year history of Gallaudet before the protest, not a single deaf person had been selected to serve as president of the college. In 1988, the Board of Trustees, which was dominated by hearing people, narrowed possible candidates down to 3 people, 2 deaf persons and a hearing person with no previous experience working with deaf people. The board, selecting the hearing person, reflected the attitude of its chairperson, who said, another political aspect of the deaf community can be seen in the National Association of the Deaf. This national organization was founded in 1880. With chapters in all 50 states, the NAD now boasts a membership of over 22,000. At its biennial conventions, NAD elects board members and officers, approves position papers from various committees, and determines its advocacy issues for the coming 2 years. The NAD also publishes the Broadcaster, a monthly publication containing articles, stories, and opinion pieces on topics of interest to the deaf community. The Broadcaster is not the only publication by deaf people intended for it. There's a national newspaper that appears monthly, and there are several newspapers that circulate. There is also a monthly news magazine. In addition, numerous more publications by national organizations that work with deaf. All of these publications include information about national and deaf community politics, information about other facets of the deaf community. An important aspect of any community is the opportunity for members to participate in a wide range of social activities. The deaf community is no exception. Local level, deaf people organize and operate clubs for deaf people. It is at these clubs that a wide range of activities are planned. Political action planning, card games, parties, and organized sporting events. There are also a large number of single interest clubs, such as deaf chess clubs, deaf ski and ski mobiling clubs, deaf bowling leagues, deaf volleyball leagues, and others. At the national level, there are sports and recreation organizations serving the interests of the deaf community. Among these organizations are the National Racquetball Association of the Deaf, the U.S. Deaf Skiers Association, National Bass Association of the Deaf, U.S. Deaf Cycling Association, U.S. Flag Football of the Deaf, and the American Athletic Association of the Deaf, the AAAD. The AAAD sponsors a number of regional and national sports tournaments. There's even an AAAD Sports Hall of Fame. At the international level, deaf people from the United States participate in summer and winter World Games for the deaf. The World Games are similar to the Olympics and allow deaf athletes from countries around the world to compete for their own gold, silver, and bronze medals. As with other minority groups, groups, the members of the deaf community use their creative and artistic skills to express their unique view of the world. These artists who are deaf include sculptors, painters, comedians, and poets. These talented individuals often use their artistry as a means of allowing the deaf community to examine its own values and attitudes. Whether you watch a performance by one of several national or local deaf theater groups, or enjoy the individual artistry of a deaf sculptor, painter, you are immediately struck by the creativity and skill so evident in their work. In addition, their work provides important insights about for hearing people who are not members of it. These insights are powerful indicators of how the community views itself and how members of the community wish to be viewed by others. Almost without exception, members of the deaf community want people who are not members of the community who respect their language and their culture. Respect for the language and culture and a willingness to develop special communication skills are prerequisites to successful interaction with members of the deaf community. There are 3 specific steps that you can take to indicate your respect for the language and the culture. Society has taught us to be afraid of human diversity and begin to accept the view that the deaf community is a linguistic and cultural minority. Adopt the perspective of the deaf community that deaf people are not handicapped or disabled. The barrier they face is a language and communication barrier, not unlike Spanish-speaking Americans. Help to replace the medical perspective with a cultural perspective by listening to the wishes of the deaf community, especially in matters that directly affect the deaf community. Even if you do not know American Sign Language, adopting the attitude reflected in these steps will indicate a level of respect and acceptance of the language of the deaf community. You may also wish to read one of several books or articles about the 200-year relationship between the deaf community and the United States. Another very concrete sign of respect and acceptance is to learn American Sign Language. Learning ASL is exactly like learning any spoken language. It can take years to become fluent, and you only really learn when you can associate with people who use the language. The most important sign of respect is the willingness to begin to learn. To help you learn ASL, there are a fairly large number of resource materials available, including text and video tapes. So, 1,000 college and university programs offering sign language courses. Even programs that offer degrees in deaf studies, sign language studies, and sign language interpretation. Of course, it is not always possible to learn ASL. Often it will be appropriate to hire a sign language interpreter. Interpreter's job is to facilitate communication between 2 people who do not know each other's language, using an interpreter to help overcome communication barriers. If you work with an interpreter to facilitate communication, make sure you talk directly to the deaf person. Make sure you work with the deaf person and the interpreter to determine the most efficient way to handle the interaction. To locate an interpreter, you may wish to contact the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. Every state has a chapter of the RID, and in addition, most metropolitan areas have interpreter referral agencies. Sometimes, especially in unscheduled interactions, there's not enough time to arrange for an interpreter. In these situations, the following communication strategies will help your interaction proceed more smoothly. Maintain eye contact with the deaf person with whom you're communicating, because deaf people rely on their eyes, not their ears. It is very distracting to the deaf person if your eyes wander during interaction. Use paper and pencil. If you cannot communicate clearly, using gesture. Often use written communication to help reduce frustration. Admit when you don't understand something. Simply shake your head or shrug your shoulders to let the deaf person know that you do not understand. Ask the deaf person to repeat or to write it down. Don't pretend to understand when you really don't. Avoid a great deal of embarrassment. Use appropriate ways of getting a deaf person's attention. Tap him or lightly on the shoulder, or wave your hand. Never throw anything or grab a deaf person's hands or arms to get their attention. Try not to use a TTY, fax machine, and the telephone relay service in your state. These technologies and services make it possible to communicate. Use the terms deaf and hearing. Remember, terms such as deaf and dumb, mute, are offensive, and those terms, like the term hearing impaired, reflect a medical view of deaf people. Don't cover your face with your hands or with other objects while communicating, because deaf people rely upon visual information. This communication can result. This important source of visual information is restricted. Don't shout because it generally doesn't help. And don't talk directly into a deaf person's ear. And try not to moan. Deaf people process information visually, not auditorily. Don't assume that all deaf people are good lip readers, because English is an extremely difficult language to lip read. There is a significant risk of confusion and misunderstanding if the deaf person has to rely solely on lip reading. Don't assume that someone with a hearing aid can understand human speech. Most deaf people who wear hearing aids do so as an aid to understanding environmental sounds and sometimes as an aid in lip reading. Don't allow others to interrupt. If an interruption is unavoidable, explain this to the deaf person. This is common etiquette that hearing people tend to forget. Don't correct a deaf person's English skills unless the deaf person asks for help. If the meaning of the message is clear despite grammatical errors or omissions, don't worry about them. However, if you don't understand the communication, ask for clarification. English is a second language for most deaf people. Above all, treat deaf people as you treat hearing people. as individuals within a larger society, a society of culturally diverse groups, search for shared values, attitudes, and beliefs, and seek out hobbies and interests you have in common.
This is truly an exciting time for the deaf community and those involved with the community. Attitudes towards deaf people, their language, and their culture are changing. Along with these changes come new and exciting challenges and opportunities. The number of hearing people who are interested in learning ASL is increasing rapidly. The perspective is finally being replaced with a more appropriate, culturally sensitive one. Hopefully, this tape has encouraged you to examine your own preconceived attitudes about deaf people and has helped you to see that there are indeed many special aspects of the deaf community. This unique community is one of the many culturally diverse groups that comprise the American melting pot, or rainbow. Members of the deaf community share a cultural, not a medical view of deaf people. What the deaf community asks of those who are not members is quite simple: a respect for its language, its culture.